second here. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Psychedelics Today. Joe Moore here, joined by Jonathan. Jonathan, I actually never asked you how to pronounce your name, and I'm sorry about that. How do we say your last name?
We say my last name, Sabbagh.
Sabbagh. Thank you. And you're the
Yeah.
CEO of Journey Clinical, which you've been operating in the ketamine space for a bunch of years now, like well over 4 years.
About 5.
5? Great. Yeah, because I remember at PS23 we chatted a bunch, and yeah, I think Kyle might still be a member, which is cool.
It really is. He's still a
Yeah,
member? That's cool.
yeah.
That's not.
So
I think Kyle may have been our first member.
oh, that's
First or
wild.
second. He was in the first 10, definitely. Yeah.
I love that. Cool. So let's chat a little bit. Like, what is Journey Clinical? What do you guys do there?
Sure. So Journey Clinical is the largest provider of psychedelic-assisted therapy in the world today. Our model and our perspective is that, empowering licensed mental health professionals to incorporate this treatment in their practice as an adjunct to therapy is the most scalable, but also the most effective way to do so. So basically, we power therapy practices by providing them all the tools they need to do it. That includes our in-house medical team. We have about a 100-person medical team led by Kyle Lapidus, who's an MD PhD who oversaw MAPS trials and a lot of people from clinical trials. We provide education in partnership with Fluence, and we have our own set of education materials that give CE credits. We take insurance when most payers in, I think, about 15 states now, and we're open in 25 states. We basically take on the medical portion of it while our therapists take on the facilitation and therapy portion, not the delivery, of course. At a high level, they send us their patients. We do an intake. It's a 1-hour intake. If they're eligible, we'll send them enough for 2 sessions. Then they have to come back for a 30-minute reevaluation to get for another 6. That's our base protocol. We don't do monthly subscriptions of ketamine. And then we also only work with people who are in a therapeutic alliance with one of our therapists. So we really encourage that dynamic to be supportive of long-term behavioral change. We also partner with Compass Pathways on, sort of like exploring what go-to-market for Comp 360 is going to look like. And we've got a few more announcements coming down the line in that regard with drug developers. We're also, we've started doing Spravato in therapy practices. So actually having a non-Journey clinical site be able to deliver Spravato. And the reason for that is that we know that it's likely that the REMs for other psychedelics are going to be similar to, or not, if not similar, but close to what the REMs for Spravato are. We've also expanded to sort of taking on broader psychiatric medication management for our patients. It makes sense for us to give holistic care, and also it's a need, right? There's a big gap there today. And so we have about 2,500 practices, or a little, actually closer to 3,000 practices in our network. I don't know, we've delivered maybe close to 800,000 hours of CAP the last couple of years. We have seen insane results with our patients where, a lot of people say 87% of them have had improvement in outcomes. But another metric that we saw recently was that 40% of our patients are actually no longer fit diagnosis criteria. So they're cured, which is wonderful, right? And those are mostly people who've adhered to treatment. So when they adhere to the full course and come back and follow up, and depends on the severity, then we really see a pretty drastic improvement in outcomes. So treatment adherence is something we've been working on as well.
So let's rewind the tape and talk about how you kind of got here. Like what kind of made you interested in ketamine, and especially starting a pretty substantial ketamine company?
Yeah, I think you and I have spoken a few times, but I'm happy to share that again. And So I'm Swiss. I grew up over there, and I worked in finance for most of my well, no, actually not anymore, but a good part of my adult life, where I started two businesses before this one from the ground up, and one day I had a really bad burnout, and I couldn't quite understand what it was, and so I realized that for most of my adult life, I was suffering from depression and anxiety, and eventually I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder from childhood trauma. Um, and, so a friend of mine brought me to try ayahuasca. It was life changing. I did it once, I did it 7 times in 2 weeks, and then I've done it multiple times since. But and it really helped. I got a chance to sort of observe inner tensions and defenses that I couldn't quite identify uh, before that. But eventually, I started having repeated difficult experiences in that setting, and it's not the fault of the facilitators. It's simply that I have a lot of PTSD, and so I started working with a therapist here in New York to ketamine assisted therapy. He diagnosed me with PTSD, and that was tremendously helpful because once not only could I name it, but work with someone in the context of that therapeutic alliance, we could really integrate that process within the context of broader therapy. And so I got better a lot faster. Eventually, I decided that I didn't really feel meaning in the work I was doing in finance. And so at the age of 38, I decided to quit that job and I went back to school and I studied clinical psychology here at the New School in New York. And as I was there, I really wanted to be a psychedelic therapist. I met Igmar Gorman, who is writing a paper on their training process, and we started chatting. And eventually, I decided to drop out of school. I still don't have a college degree, and I decided to found Journey Clinical because I enjoyed not only scaling businesses but also doing well while doing good, and I cared about this mission that changed my life. And I had the blessing of having my wife join me as a co-founder on this journey, and that in itself was something. So that's kind of how I got here and why I care so much about doing this well.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And we're
Sure.
chatting a little bit earlier about, even um, when this stuff is done a little bit suboptimally, we're still seeing really decent results that seem to be surpassing standard of care. So things like SSRIs, if we're talking about depression, and maybe even some CBTs. I don't know the performance percentages of CBT alone, but I'm just really continually impressed to see like, oh, look, like even without therapy, we're seeing really great results. But um, and the stark example is the anesthesiologist running a therapy for psychiatric indications with ketamine and still doing kind of okay. But then we, come forward and say, oh, look, psychotherapy done really well paired with a drug is actually really, really helpful. Um, can you talk about what you all have been seeing at Journey?
Such a good question. I think where we should start is that the reason why we're seeing good results with or without psychotherapy is that ketamine is really good at alleviating anxiety and depression. It's just very effective, right? When it essentially is, the neurological reaction where it becomes antagonist to certain hormonal or neuroreceptors and regulates hormonal imbalances in the brain. That is an extremely effective way of cure or solving immediately depression. I think people who have TRD respond within 24 hours to this, right? The other thing it does well is create neuroplasticity. And like all psychedelics, when you have neuroplasticity, you're a little bit more open. And the after effect is quite long, right? We see some of these studies on IV ketamine where people are still, respondents a few weeks or sometimes even 3 months after. So in that context, I think it's important to acknowledge that the drug itself is effective. And if we start to consider even other ways of looking at it, and I think you and I were sort of kind of chit-chatting a little bit before we got started, it's a nuanced conversation that we really should consider here. What is more effective or less effective if you consider Spravato, for example, which is a version of ketamine, or at least a ketamine derivative. Their protocol is twice a week for the first 4 weeks, and then weekly for at least 6 months. And so they are essentially banking on, excuse me, on recurring use of the drug to keep a stable state. If you look at people who go to IV infusion clinics, they tend to do a course of 8 treatments, and then they'll do monthly boosters. And at Journey, we see similar things, right? They do the full course, and then some people who need it will do boosters, maybe on a monthly basis for a while. So the reality is the severity and the need for support of the drug varies from person to person. There's definitely a minimum course, I do believe, which is at least 8 courses, and usually people do need a booster for a little bit. But I wanted to sort of like acknowledge first that the drugs work, right? And I as do SSRIs, as do other drugs, and some people need to be on them for longer than others. That being said, does therapy really create an absolute delta that changes everything? And I personally believe it does. I believe it by lived experience, really, where you are potentially depressed because of a hormonal imbalance. Let's say you have a thyroid condition, or you could have an event in your life. These things creep up, right? And levels of stress creep up over time. Um, if you have chronic conditions like PTSD, like bipolar disorder, they're different, right? And so, some of these things may be physiological, but often they're environmental, they're cultural, and they're also part of your, you know, medical and family history. And so if you're considering long-term behavioral change, which I think really is the goal of what a lot of people in the psychedelic field have sought out to do, is to bring more effective means of treatment that have a higher impact on the people that are using them. Um, the inclusion of psychological support and therapy when you're having an experience that's allowing you to safely re-experience certain things, or at least maybe gain insight into what is driving you to feeling that way once you get to baseline, I think really promotes long-term behavioral change. So maybe the reason why we're seeing the 40% of people who adhere longer and who do a few more sessions versus those who get an immediate impact have a good result, but try to enforce, if we try to enforce more adherence, it's not because we want to sell them more drugs. It's because um, just like with SSRIs, once you get to baseline, right, it takes 4 weeks on an SSRI to get a baseline. You still might be anxious. So once you get to baseline, then you need to stay on them, because then you're maybe starting to be able to experience life in a different way, and you're able to change your learned behaviors. And I think some of the magic of ketamine and other psychedelics is that the neural plasticity that it generates allows for a period where you could reflect and sort of shift belief systems and change behavior patterns, or acknowledge them in a way that you may not have been open to before. And one of the things I think is the most rewarding, we've got this so we have a sort of like Facebook like interface on our platform at Journey, and we have this section called Client Wins. And it's if I'm ever like a little down, I just go and check it out. And There's some of them that are like rest in peace depression, or my patient didn't want to live anymore and now they're happy. And so, seeing someone stuck, being able to connect and sit with those feelings in a container that they feel safe about and see results where they weren't, I think is one of the magical parts of what psychedelics do. And so having someone that you can have a strong therapeutic alliance and with whom the transference is a positive thing in this case, I think could be it is a big added value. And even if you look at clinical trials, um, you know, for example, Compass aren't including therapy in their clinical trials, but they are encouraging psychological support, right? My good friend Josh White, who runs Fireside, who I love, big shout out to him, and he's got 1,000 calls a month or something coming in. I mean, we did work with. I had a little personal project over the summer with the Zendo and a few others for sort of like promoting harm reduction at Burning Man outside of Journey, but just we created a little thing and sitting, not guiding, holding space, giving someone the sense of safety and bringing that into that experience, I think allows for your defenses to lower in a safer way of having experiences that are not, just about the drug, but about you and your process and maybe going a little bit deeper. And then, quite frankly, something that I've been personally experiencing over the past few years, and I've done a lot of psychedelics and I've worked with that a lot. And also, at the end of the day, your ceremony is your life. I think life is ceremony. This is the real ceremony. And so, you know, being equipped with tools to take those insights and bring them into the world and you know really see lasting change is it takes work and you need help. I think we can't do it alone. So it's a very long-winded answer I gave you, but that's my perspective on it.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And um, you mentioned compass, and it seems very carefully phrased, right? Encourage psychological support. And I have the thought sometimes that is a therapist the right person to have in the room for these things? And I think that really depends on the client patient fit, or sorry, patient provider fit. And I I'm not as afraid of what, people react strongly. Oh, Compass isn't using therapists, and people are up in arms. I'm saying like, oh, this is actually really interesting and a great way to experiment to see like, is a therapist actually required to be in the room if we're providing other kinds of things. So the phrasing you had was like Compass encourages psychological support. Is it the case that they actually have psychological support, or is it optional, or do you know how that goes?
I'm not in a position to speak for Compass Pathways, and I would
Yeah.
let them speak for themselves. And so whatever I said, I am assuming they encourage, but I would encourage you to speak to them.
Yeah, they don't love talking to me, but if we can make that happen, that would be lovely. Um, yeah, so, like, I'm super in support of how do we actually lower costs, because this is really expensive stuff, to deliver, even,
Yeah.
like, like, I'm sure your business models have been really kind of fascinating to work through, and especially, like, how do we get insurance? And, like, so having a licensed professional really makes insurance a little bit more practical of a thing to get. And like this, is a really interesting thing. So can you can you let's see, where do we want to go from here? So I think maybe well, okay, before we jump, how can people learn, like, say you're a therapist, and they want to say, like, is this for me to bring to my clients? Like, what does that look like? And then we can kind of jump on to some other things.
Sure. Well, I think I mean, not to toot our own horn, but I think we have one of the most comprehensive educational platforms, thanks to one part our partnership with Lyft, but also we've created a lot of peer-led learning, a lot of internal support, a lot of support from our medical team and protocols training, a lot of groups on how to talk to their patients and caseload reviews. So I think that we provide a tremendously comprehensive offering for a reasonable price that people can come and explore and understand. And there's a lot of information there where they can learn and start at the same time. I think also sometimes people worry that it's a little bit new, whether their patients are not going to uh, be the right fit or want, but it is like everything, something that you have to one feel comfortable talking about, and people are less afraid. Like patients are find it less weird than we would think, especially with current discourse and even support from the FDA as we saw recently. And the results are pretty tremendous. And so we've seen some of our therapists really have tremendous success and grow very flourishing practices. And I think that's something that's quite great. And also probably the next phase of what therapy is going to look like, right? Especially when we consider AI and things like that.
Right, right. So we'll circle back to AI later. Um, cool. And you mentioned Fireside. I'm generally hugely in support of Fireside. Um,
Josh is the man.
I'm
He's my
I'm a
buddy.
little nervous about like admitting to crimes on a recorded line. Generally, I wrote about that yesterday on my Substack that
Yeah,
it's potentially better than calling the cops on yourself or
he's so
an
great.
ambulance.
Those guys are so thoughtful. I was like such a fan. We did this whole thing with the Zendo and with Josh, and we worked with Dan Safe. This wasn't Journey capacity. It was me,
Hmm.
and we created this
Yeah.
thing called a Heart Association. It was really just bringing awareness to sort of like harm reduction. And those guys are so awesome. Like there's all these people that do this work, not for profit, but for simply just showing up and making sure that people are safe. And so there's a lot of good stuff out there, and I think it's really really good to call things out and provide pretty simple tools for people to know how to navigate situations that can be really scary.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, and really get you in a lot of trouble and at times harm, right?
Yeah,
So, yeah, I want to have them on to kind of like dig into some more of that safety stuff. And I'm actually
yeah,
recording with I think the ED of
yeah.
Zendo tomorrow.
Oh, cool. Well, if
Yeah.
you guys ever want to do a jam all together, I'd be down. I love those guys.
Oh, great! I love that. Um, so there's really high performance and seemingly really safe ways of doing ketamine clinically, and we were chatting about um, kind of the ways in which it could look a little suboptimal and or riskier or harmful. Like, have you seen any methods used in the clinical space that look kind of like harmful practices around ketamine?
You know, I'm thinking on how to
Yeah,
answer this question
yeah, it's a delicate
constructively.
one, so no
Yeah,
stress. And
yeah.
um,
I think there is. So let's talk about safety and then efficacy in two different ways a little bit. There is
mhm,
real world proof of safety of this drug, and I think that's pretty good to know. That essentially in itself, the drug is quite safe. Like for example, there are confusion about overdoses and unfortunate outcomes where it's very difficult to overdose on ketamine. It's almost like there's been reports of people in anesthesia settings, getting the zero wrong. We're not talking here about a magnitude of like hundreds of milligrams, and being okay. And there are safety guidelines that need to be put in place so that unfortunate incidents don't come. Like one thing we tell people is you need a chaperone. You have to have the therapist, like, notified, or online. We have to vet them. Don't go in the water. Don't, like, I mean, there are very sort of like strict things to observe, and is a dissociative anesthetic and should be taken seriously. And so, in that context, I think safety measures clearly communicated and supported by a strong medical protocol, and if you have a therapeutic alliance, I think are a way to deliver things very, very effectively. Um, I haven't seen ketamine clinics deliver things in an unsafe manner, and IV infusions. They're pretty straightforward, and so usually that's pretty effective. If you look at sort of regular, not regular use, but like Spravato is weekly, and we're not seeing people come up with chronic cystitis in those cases. So I think that seems to be okay. Um,
I'm
I
gonna
think
ask an
to me,
obnoxious clinical, like,
go, yeah,
so like, do you? I think the term overdose is a complicated one, and we
yeah,
often say overdose, and we kind of mean the guy on the street that died or our friend that
correct.
died, but from non-clinical use. Like, how do you like? It's really freaking hard to like overdose in like a way in which it's gonna restrict your breathing and put you at real danger. It could be situationally really dangerous, you know,
Correct.
Burning Man the wrong time of the day or like the wrong place in New York City or something. Like that could be really bad and really risky. But like how do you like to dance around this overdose term?
I mean, I take things from a lens that is medical,
Yeah.
right? So when I consider a medical term, it is death.
Yeah.
So that means, like, are you going to die if you what is it? Is there an LD50 that exists where you're dead?
Hmm.
And there are clearly LD50s even on ketamine, but that LD50 is insanely high. If you were to do it on opiates, then it's lower. Like, so, I mean, and so on and so forth. So what we're talking about here is a medical term.
Yeah.
However, like harm, so we don't encourage recreational use. I think a lot of the harm that we're seeing is in the context of recreational use, and other people abuse a lot of, prescription drugs, unfortunately, and we screen for that. We actually don't prescribe, ketamine to people who are actively using ketamine, or who maybe who have a history of ketamine addiction, and uh, we're very, very conscious of being very careful about that. And that's very important. And so I think anything that would encourage that in people that have those types of problems, I'm not aware of. I'm sure other companies are taking similar precautions. I would imagine that everybody's conscious in that way, or they would have, greater issues. Um, uh, I think that's where you start to see problems, right? Like, so we're not in the business of selling drugs. We're in the business of delivering care, and we're in the business of delivering care in a medically structured way.
Hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, like I've not seen anything super explicitly dangerous out there. Um, some people are reacting to some clinics actually sending out injectable ketamine now, and people, I think perhaps rightfully so, have needle phobia sometimes, and maybe they're reacting a little bit to that, or the idea of like injecting drugs that alter consciousness. We're not so taboo around injecting like IVF related drugs, right? Like that seems pretty normal these days.
Mhm,
But we don't talk about that as like an injectable thing. But I
mhm.
think people are responding to this new route of administration that looks edgy. I don't super understand the why behind it, though I am in support of more routes of administration being available if it's medically appropriate, right? Like, and I don't know. What have you been seeing or thinking about in related to like different routes of administration?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not very familiar with the
Mhm.
subcutaneous route of administration, so I don't have much comment on it, because we haven't delivered it, and Also, I haven't tried it, so I don't know. I think that it is a question of bioavailability and proper clinical follow-up. We've decided to date, at least, to stick with sublingual ketamine for a variety of reasons. One of them is that it is, you know, easier to control the dose that people are taking. It is, you know, like nasal sprays can be a little more complicated in terms of abuse guidelines, I think. Uh, I think it's just a question of medical follow-up, but I don't have experience with that I
Mhm.
can speak to. To your point, there is a number of things like GLP-1s that are injected, and people are commonly or more comfortable with that, but we just haven't tried it out. Like Spravato,
Mhm.
for example, is a nasal spray that you go when someone
Right.
administers it to you, but you don't keep it at home. You know,
Mhm.
people
In
could
your
people can
Go ahead.
like people who abuse like people abuse drugs at times. What we do to prevent that the most is essentially like really proper medical follow-up and the therapeutic alliance with a therapist. And so I think we catch a lot. Like we turn down about 15% of the people that come to us, not because they're abusing it, but we just generally turn people down.
Mhm. Yeah, well, that's good. It's important to actually turn folks down. And, yeah. So, yeah, I'm trying to think of, like, negative use cases. Like, when I look at the news and analyze this kinda, like, larger clinical ketamine story for psychiatric type scenarios, like, I see once in a while people really cherry picking an argument. Like, "Hey, look at this over here, therefore not safe," when it's really, like, not supported by the data, and I find that problematic. Like, there was one case a long time ago, and this is, like, really gross, but people actually, like, melted lozenges and injected it. I'm like, that's just not good thinking. Like, that's not a thing that you inject. That's not meant ever for injection, and even if you're trying to, like, get high, that's not a smart way to do it. Um, and I don't know that we can save people from stupid, like that. And that, to be unkind to that person that did that, they probably got hurt. But I think it's just, like that stuff's for your mouth and for your GI tract, not ever for your bloodstream.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, but you have by integrating Spravato, you did experiment with a new route of administration, which is interesting.
Sure.
Like it's I've not had Spravato. I've had I assume it's a sort of like saline kind of solution, similar to, yeah, compounded sprays. Yeah, very measured, uniform dosing. The clinician doesn't necessarily have much say on the dosing because it's like a tight thing with J&J or Janssen
Mhm.
and
Yep.
and the FDA, and um, but it works and it's reimbursable by insurance, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's,
It's the fastest growing drug in J&J's portfolio.
yeah, and I it's complicated in that it's effectively, like you say, a form of ketamine. It's like the one it's like a filtered like S ketamine, so it's like a left-handed or something version of the molecule. So it's like paying these rates, but that's just them working the system that has been handed to us. And a lot of people are like frustrated by the pricing, but also they're the company that did it and
It's
brought
also
it through.
covered, right? I think it's
Exactly.
I find actually the use case of Spravato to be very encouraging as an evolution for our space, and I think should be celebrated by everyone in this industry because it is the best, most successful, and to date only real example of what a mass rollout of version of a psychedelic drug in the context of treatment resistance. And now I know they also got the categorization for just straight up depression. It's highly effective. There's a huge need for it. It's covered by insurance. They have REMs that are the REMs that they are, and they may or may not evolve over time. But one thing is for sure is that a bunch of people who weren't managing to get better are getting better thanks to this. And so they are in certain ways paving the way for the rest of us to get to, broader adoption of what is a desperate need for people to innovate in a space that is unfortunately growing very rapidly, which is the need for mental health care, the mismatch for our ability to find prescribers, even to prescribe normal meds. I mean, so, this is, I think this and AI is really the innovations that exist. And they're both awesome.
I remember
And yeah,
Go ahead. I
no,
remember
no, and I think,
Hamilton Morris on stage a
yeah,
couple years ago. Where was it? It was at a discovery session in San Francisco, like a bicycle day situation,
I
and the
love Hamilton.
idea
He's actually my neighbor on the floor, and I keep running into him in random places.
That's funny. That's funny. So the idea the idea he was presenting was like, a boohoo for the psychedelic community that, "Oh, no, more money is coming in for psychedelic research and
Oh yeah,
medicalization, and you just don't like who it's coming from, but it's still here, and it's still progress in terms of, like, new covered options." Like, yeah, it would be, really interesting and innovative if it could cost, like, the normal price of ketamine, but this is just J&J, like, worked it through, and they solved this problem with regulators, and they're the one with the psychedelic medicine right now. Um,
yeah.
yeah, it doesn't mean anybody else can't in this current frame. It's just, a little bit pricey to do it. Um,
Well, it's covered by insurance, right?
I mean, drug development. Yes, it's covered by insurance.
Yeah, drug development is
Um,
pricey, like realistically. So, look, I like to believe that everybody's trying to do the right thing and coming from the best possible place. And so I completely understand perspectives on incentives that drive larger systems to profit from needs of others, and the critique that is also a nuanced thing. I think we should keep nuance in our thoughts and in the way we consider things. And it is a nuanced thing that there is a system that is rewarding certain behaviors or not. But I have a belief that I hold true, especially running a venture-backed for-profit company, and I would always hold true. I think in general is that you can do well while doing good. And I think that that is what they're doing. And so they're investing $1 billion and getting a new drug not just developed, but then you need to commercialize it and go to market. And you need to talk to insurance companies, and you need to convince medical practices and other people to invest in that and build on distribution networks. And it's a huge job, right, to do that. And um, while a few of us have had the pleasure, privilege, and honor to experience these things in an indigenous way where they're from their roots. And not if we're looking to solve a broader problem, which is essentially 50 million people in this country that are depressed. It's massive, and that we have to sometimes wait 2 to 3 months to see a prescriber because there's a shortage, right? So solutions that are going to solve these are scaled solutions, and so the incentives allow scale, and therefore we also need that as well, right? And I think that the nuance here is that there's room for everybody, and that one doesn't necessarily take away from the other. But it is easy living in an industry where we all understand a certain language to believe that this language is shared by everybody else. But until the day your grandmother tells you that you should take some MDMA to solve your problems with your colleagues, and as she would tell you to take an Advil, we have not gained sort of like adoption really at scale of these treatment modalities. And so anything that is um, broad scale, corporate, or um, initiatives that are even supported by larger groups and government are things that we should be highly supportive of, rejoice, and be participants in a positive manner in that conversation. That is my perspective.
mhm, yeah. Yeah, and thanks for that. And I think it's important to just consider how complex all these systems are. And
Sure.
it's not just like, here's mushrooms, like go. It's a very different conversation than that from this like really, really uh I don't know, let's call it just our contemporary medical apparatus, right? Like that's
Yeah.
currently undergoing a lot of really interesting things.
Mhm.
And we'll see how that plays out. But I think, there's, this is what we have, and this is, we're doing what we can with what we have. And I think that's it's important. And it's
Yeah.
still like, look how far behind Europe is. Like they don't have this. Um, you know, I don't like
Well, they have
being
ketamine.
not done this way, right?
They do.
Like the way
They have
Journey does it.
not Journey's way, but they have ketamine clinics, and they have they're bringing it in. It's growing. Um,
Yeah, I think that's the way to put it. It's growing and it's not as
yeah.
mature as it is here in the United States. Like it's still, a little bit difficult, more difficult to access than it is here.
Yeah. I mean,
But
people
it's coming.
complain a lot. People
Mhm,
complain a lot about America, but like as a country, like our ability to sort of be innovative and scale things and sort of like drive things forward, that's pretty great. And I come from Europe. I grew up in Switzerland, so I know and I feel the difference in speed and opportunity. And so that's something that it's good to remember that we're lucky that we're in a place where things can move at this pace, and that is also allowed that's allowed by industry, right?
mhm, absolutely. So in terms of, futures for ketamine, you mentioned AI a few times. Like it's sometimes the boogeyman in the room, if you watch South Park. And then
I
another
haven't seen the last episodes, but I heard that there was a lot about AI.
it's worth it. It's worth it. Um, and yeah, just this, and it's not just like South Park, right? It's like pop culture sometimes really afraid of AI. I think it's Kevin Kelly did a really good treatment of it. He's the guy that founded Wired magazine, and he's like, there's going to be some scary stuff that comes, but the huge benefits that are going to come, it's just like any new technology that rolls out, like the devastation of the internet was actually pretty fruitful, and most of us wouldn't want to go back,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
similarly, the fruits of AI are going to be very incredible. Um,
Yeah.
and what are you seeing in terms of like futures for medicine and ketamine around AI?
Well, I'm a big fan of AI, but I'm also like very fascinated by generally expansion of like human consciousness and singularities in our species evolution that change who we are. And I tend to believe that that's the inflection point that we're reaching with
Hmm.
the mass introduction of a technology that is being adopted faster than anything we've seen in our entire history as a species. So I find that interesting, exciting, and there are obviously use cases, and they've been discussed at length of where these things can go wrong, and accessibility issues. Affordability can be solved in mindful ways and ways that were never really possible before. And the fear of replacements versus augmentation, I think, is sometimes a little bit over indexed on. Um, I think, especially in our field, right? And so the ability for people to integrate these technologies, work with them, understand them, and offer better care to people who can't have it is going to be highly, highly enabled by AI. I also think that offering, psychedelic therapy and therapy practices is going to be a great way for therapists to also expand and give more robust offering to their patients, which I think is a huge deal. Um, but also it's good to understand what AI is today and what AI is not. And, there are complex algorithms that build on each other's, and there are complex multi-agent LLM systems that process information. And it's fascinating. And some of the stuff that happens within them, we don't completely know. However, they are not we don't have AGI today. And so, there are, for the time being, augmentation tools. Some things will be replaced, but then the opportunity that is going to be created for people to deliver even better care is going to be, in my opinion, tremendous. So I choose to be a positive, an optimist here in this era. And I recall one of the partners at a fund called USV, who's a friend called Albert Wenger, was doing a presentation for us, and he was saying how do we consider our future as a species, right? And he was showing this really cool. It was a very simple and short presentation, and the first slides were the 1950s, where you had, the idea of what the future would be. It was a family in the back of a Cadillac that was self-driving, and they were all smiling and having lunch in family in the back while the car drove itself, right? And then we had the Jetsons, and then we then had Blade Runner and The Matrix and Ex Machina, or Elysium. And so our visions of imagination of the future, and the Terminator, right? And our visions of imagination of the future influence our creativity. But there's positivity in what we're doing, and it's possible that this makes our life way better. And so it really depends on the intentionality we bring to what we create and what we choose to infuse into this amazing technology. However, denying it's happening, I don't think, is an option. So I choose not to have fear, but to embrace and to participate in how this future is going to look.
Mm. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's yeah, not uh, I think when too many of us fixate on the negative, like we're kind of like missing the boat. Like how do we actually kind of build with these new tools and build that future that we want? And there's a lot of agency now that we have because things have been kind of like power has been liberated to us. It's
Yeah,
it's not perfect. None of this stuff's perfect yet. And like I think I saw some like Josh Hardman had some critique the other day about like one of the studies getting some space at the recent Stockholm conference, and it was an AI model
love
kind
it.
of like
I love the Josh, by the way. He's a good guy.
just great critical feedback, and it's
Yeah, yeah.
important for us to have that
Good
voice,
guy.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and he's great. Also that. And
indeed.
the idea was that like AI in some clinical trial was only doing analysis on the words used in the session, which is what it has access to. And I think like there's a use case there, but there's also a limitation there. And I think that's like, a smart critic says use case, we can actually get some value here and like and help people with it. But it's not necessarily the case that it's like the be all end all, right? We still need that
Right.
clinician in the room with their clinical judgment, taking that
Sure.
machine's feedback, right?
Of course. But then also imagine the ability to get 24/7 readings on your patients.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. If we had good wearables, feeding
Or just
in.
like, yeah, or just like being able to interpret and interact with people all the time, every day, forever. Like,
Hmm.
wow,
Yeah. Like
it's
who
pretty
needs the
dope.
most care right now? And,
Yeah,
what is the appropriate kind of like amount of time to spend with people based on
yeah,
where they're at. Right. And
yeah. Or even just
yeah.
like feeding that back to the right people, not just for their clinicians, for clinical trials, for like, I mean, like there is a lot that can be prevented, right? People don't need to go into a crisis.
So with your data set at Journey, like, is there a good amount of um, like structure to your data such that you could start deploying these tools
Sure.
for analyzing how to make it better? And what are you all
Yeah, I
looking at?
mean, I don't think I can comment on that, but what I can tell you is that Miriam used to work in AI before, so she knows very well what that looks like. It was her job right before Journey, and I've been fascinated by that. And we've integrated AI, in multiple parts of our business, and it is a logical thing to do.
Yeah, I did about 20 years in software
Oh yeah.
before the psychedelic space, and
Oh
one of
cool.
my
I didn't
employers
know
was,
that.
yeah, I don't advertise it too much,
Yeah.
um, but one of my employers is actually a major innovator in natural language
Oh
understanding
nice.
and processing.
Cool.
And so like it's been a huge part of like what I've kind of known about from the tech space for a very long time, and
Yeah.
it's finally interesting to see people start discussing it, um,
Yeah.
more openly.
I mean, we see a lot of therapists use it also, like they use it for note taking, like RCM, like so much time and cost and like efficiency, like saved, But I mean, I think there's more. There's a whole other opportunity there that's massive. We're also seeing some pretty like interesting behavior, right? OpenAI hired a bunch of therapists to support them when they are handing off sort of like more risky situations. I mean, I think the human machine interaction story and the human psychedelics and the therapists supporting those two types of things and medical professionals supporting them and building, you know, a better system that's really fragmented and broken for the world and for people in America, but everywhere really is it's a big opportunity to make millions of people's lives better.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
not and also augment your own business, and like it's good, like there is a virtuous circle in here. It's just really depends on how you consider things and approach it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I find it interesting, like the different ways. Like, so let's get a little explicit, right? Like a lot of people are using GPT, Anthropic, Grok as therapists. Like Grok has an explicit therapist mode, which I found kind of hilarious. I tried it for a moment and the answers were just so like absurd. GPT, you can kind of trick it into acting like a therapist, a little bit, and that's fun. And I think that's a little bit, more pleasant at least. I don't know if it's good therapy or not. And then I've heard some people say the models or the things they can train Anthropic to do are actually really, really killer. And then we'll see like the other side where, Vice starts going, oh, the sky's falling, because that's what Vice does. And people are using it for therapy and girlfriends and whatever else. And it's like, yeah, people are going to use tools in all sorts of ways. Like the
Well, I
spray
can tell you
can.
that 50
Mhm.
about half of Americans have used AI for some form of mental health already.
Oh, wow.
So like,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, I wish that many Americans had used MDMA, but I guess I'll settle for therapy, from
Yeah,
from
yeah. Well, maybe
OpenAI.
maybe if they had it accessible, and maybe they will soon, they might.
Right,
Um,
it's interesting.
um, but I don't think it's like a replacement, right? Like
Hmm,
the transfer. I think there is such a thing as transference to technology. This transference to psychedelics for sure. This then container with a therapist. Um, I don't quite believe we're at a stage where you know, a journey, a ketamine-assisted therapy journey can be administered by OpenAI, and I don't think they intend to. And I think these are things that you're creating safety and closeness, and I think that is a thing. But
but
it's
there would
part
be
of our life.
clinics planning to do it though, right? Like, there is economic incentive, so people would be looking at that. I've chatted with a couple, and, like,
Yeah,
I find that
I mean,
interesting because
sure.
humans aren't necessarily cheap, especially ones with graduate degrees and licenses, and I don't know what to do with that other than to know it's coming. And like,
Yeah,
um,
I mean, I think look, there's 50 million people in America. There's 45,000 psychiatrists or prescribers, and there's like maybe like 1 million therapists. 70% of people in therapy take meds. Like
mhm,
there's no shortage of human beings who need help here. It's just adapting the approach we have to leveraging ourselves. The problem isn't scarcity of people who need help, unfortunately, which is really sad. It is essentially our fear or our ability to grow and integrate, and that's what we try to help people do. But um, I think anything that helps us scale a small system to serve a gigantic population is a positive.
mhm, yeah. Um, and I'm not afraid of it, right? Like, I think there's a lot of people that are. Um, it will be
Yeah,
used incorrectly, it will be used really amazingly too. And I think over time, Like, this is just how, like, I kind of see it as this is what technology does, is it innovates you, it innovates, it makes us a little scared, we learn, we keep
Yeah.
improving, and that's kind of like this march of whatever kind of culture, like, I don't know, civil project of civilization that we're in right now. That's kind of just yet another innovative thing.
Yeah.
Um,
And
yeah,
I'm actually like pretty impressed about like the therapist using it and integrating in their practice. Like, people are just adopting it. And yeah, I think there is reason to. It's also, you've made such a great point during this conversation to enter into nuance and conversation about topics that we would want to avoid. And so, is it that people are scared, and we should have a conversation about why they're scared, and okay, and hold that, and hear them, and recognize why that fear is arising, and see if there is a part of it that is scary, a part of it that's exciting. Like, what is that? What do they mean? Why are they scared of? And what is it open for the world as opportunities? Same as psychedelics, right? Like, the people are scared of sometimes showing that, telling their patients that they had an experience, or that they are doing it, and what the benefits of that are when they realize the leverage they can have on people who are having a hard time is very high. And so when they get that aha moment, then they become very, very comfortable and actually advocates for it. It's quite amazing. And so all these things are true. All these things should be acknowledged, and I think entering into conversation and debate and communication and support in a supportive way and in an open way is probably, in my opinion, the way to bring everyone to more understanding over time about what's going on.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, radically important. And are you hope like, so back to ketamine specifically, is there
Hmm.
anything you're hopeful about and kind of like the new innovations for ketamine, like different indications, different kinds of I don't know, studies coming out, or hope for some sort of like, how do we all get together and actually fund research here so we can actually like point to journals and whatnot?
Yeah. I mean, I'm hopeful for a lot of things. I'm hopeful
Mhm.
that the head of the FDA made it a priority to do that. I'm hopeful that Spravato is so successful and that it got, covers also just MDD instead of, major depressive disorder, not just treatment resistant. I'm hopeful of the progress of all the drug developers in our space and continued funding of them and their existence, which is a positive thing. I think also, Atai is having some great results with the DMT, with Beckley's molecule, and there's a lot down. There's like 1,000 clinical trials going on. My friend Blake at Transcend just got breakthrough therapy status from the FDA, and these are awesome pieces of news, and we support all of them, and we want to work with all of them. So um, I think there's tremendous amounts to be hopeful for, um, and these are difficult. It's difficult to go through adoption phases of newness, and unlike AI, that is a technology that's virally can take fire. Adopting new treatments and expanding them are sometimes a little slower, but it is pretty fast. I mean, you and I were talking and 5 years ago, and it was like, hey, it's a thing. Maybe it's a renaissance, and there's like five people, and we all knew each other, and now there are very serious people. I think the Gilgamesh sale was a tremendous testament to a industry player being purchased by a serious drug developer. So things are moving, in my opinion, in the right direction, and we are heading towards a future where these are standards of care, and the treatments will differ, and we don't probably know what they're going to look like, but they're there and they're considered. And the reason why, to go back to the discussion on incentives, is that essentially people behave where incentives are aligned, and the incentives of employers are to have people not miss work, and the incentives of payers are to have people not fall off treatment and have to be hospitalized. And the incentives of hospitals is to have less ER visits that cost them money. And the incentives of people themselves are to one, not lose their income and be happy. And ultimately, these are. I'm talking about very cold financial incentives, but these are the way you move essentially large systems towards a virtuous circle. And I think this is positive. So I'm excited by that because ultimately the output of all of these incentives, if they're becoming supportive of what we're doing, is millions and millions of people living better lives. And I think that's quite a beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice mic drop moment there. Anything else you want to mention before we kind of work towards closing?
No, I'm very grateful to everything this community has given me and offers and continues to do, and I applaud the courage of all those people, all of us that keep steadfast and hold the flag and continue to advocate. And I'm also grateful for the different voices and the challenges that we get. And I love being invited to discourse and nuance. And I'm grateful to you for inviting that in a conversation without where we can just kind of chat. And I think that's great. That's important today.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jonathan, so much, and I hope we can do it
So
again.
yeah, anytime. My pleasure.